In the top stories, Skelec outlines cause of island-wide power outage on Wednesday morning. Discussions ongoing in Antigua on which vaccine will be acquired, and Pompeo says Al-Qaeda's new home base is Iran. Hello and welcome to the ZIZ Midday Newscast. Today's Wednesday, the 13th of January 2021. I'm Jason Davis. Nationally, the St. Kitts electricity company Skelec has restored electricity to all feeders across the island following an island-wide outage on Wednesday morning. ZIZ News spoke with Corporate Communications Manager at Skelec, Patrice Harris, who gave an update on the outage, noting that it was due to an issue at the power plant.
At about 7:45 a.m. this morning, we would have had a failure in one of our switchgears at the power plant, which would have resulted in an island-wide power outage. We were able to identify the fault that would have caused the island-wide outage, and we were able to restore power to our power plant at about 10:15 this morning.
Ms. Harris used the opportunity to apologize for the inconvenience caused due to the outage and encouraged the public to follow Skelec's media pages for credible, timely information. CARACOM member countries, including St. Kitts and Nevis, will be taking a unified approach towards international lending agencies as the region tries to recover from the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic. This, according to Prime Minister Dr. the Honorable Timothy Harris, who in an interview with ZIZ News gave an update on an emergency meeting of CARACOM heads on Tuesday focusing on economic recovery and transformation. Dr. Harris said the heads heard a report put forward by Barbados Prime Minister the Honorable Mia Mottley on the findings of a committee who were tasked with determining the best way forward for the region. He said several proposals were listed to be discussed with international lending agencies such as the World Bank that would assist the region's recovery. Among them were the forgiveness of debt incurred in responding to the pandemic and the revamp of the Vulnerability Index, which is used to assess Caribbean countries.
What does the Vulnerability Index imply? By and large, that you can't just assess a country based on how well they are doing in terms of GDP growth. We can see that in the case of Dominica or even St. Kitts to a lesser extent, a hurricane can come and all that you have are gone. You have to build back, as it were, from scratch. Contrast that if a hurricane were to hit Florida, then the rest of the states still be basically intact. So the vulnerability is much more intense for us as small island states. And so we are saying, look at other factors, look at our weaknesses, look at our vulnerabilities, so we have a broad-based composite measure.
The Prime Minister said the next step is for the committee to meet with individual states to determine their precise needs. In other news, the fire department is investigating a fire that broke out at a Chinese restaurant on Keon Street on Tuesday night. According to Fire Chief Everett O'Garrow, at about 9:23 p.m., the Bastyr unit of the Fire and Rescue Services responded to a blaze at a Chinese restaurant located east of the Bastyr police station. After arriving on the scene, the officers observed that the fire was in the kitchen and were able to contain the blaze there. The report said kitchen appliances were severely damaged in the fire. The fire chief said the cause of the blaze was a result of the gradual buildup in and around one of the deep fryers, which eventually led to a grease explosion. He said the restaurant was open at the time of the explosion, but nobody was injured. The fire chief urged restaurant owners and persons who operate deep fryers to frequently and periodically clean them in an effort to avoid these incidents. We now move to news on the regional scene. In Antigua and Barbuda, the deputy chairman of the Vaccine Advisory Committee established by the Health Ministry shared his thoughts with ABS News about the vaccines to be acquired. More in this report.
Dr. Courtney Lewis explains the factors being looked at in determining which vaccine will be chosen.
Essentially, we're looking at all aspects. We're looking at how feasible it is to transport the vaccine to Antigua Barbuda safely, to house it in Antigua Barbuda safely, to distribute it safely and efficaciously to the population. We're looking at the cost that's involved in the vaccines.
The population's comfort levels with the various vaccines is also being taken into consideration. The trials and their outcomes also form part of the group's decision. Dr. Lewis says the goal is to provide the populace with the best vaccine. The public will be advised of what's being done and what to expect.
Once more information becomes available to us, we can deliberate on it, make some kind of adjudication on it, then yes, we will have a sequence. It won't be one, it won't be two, it will be a sequence of other public addresses.
Dr. Lewis says a decision has not yet been made on who will first receive the vaccine. This determination, he says, will be made once the best vaccine is chosen.
But I think reason should reign in that decision. So we're talking about the people who are most at risk, who most need it, and the people who are most front line and come in contact with COVID-19 patients most often.
Dr. Lewis says it is difficult to determine the percentage of people who would need to be vaccinated for there to be herd immunity. He says this would have to be determined by past data on illnesses or similar coronaviruses. However, the group estimates at least 70%. Sherilyn Beezer reporting for ABS News.
In Guyana, U.S. Admiral Craig Fowler denies it is using Guyana to launch an attack on Venezuela. He was speaking during the signing of an agreement between Guyana and the United States of America at the Barry de Benab State House on Tuesday. More in this report from Wendell Badry of HGP-TV News.
The comments by the U.S. Admiral followed a question posed by this newscast concerning what kind of support the United States would offer to Guyana in the face of the escalating border controversy between the two countries. Admiral Fowler further stated.
The U.S. supports the international process that's in place for a peaceful resolution of a border controversy. Our focus, and the focus that General Bess and I have, is working on areas that we can enhance our bilateral relationship, things that will strengthen the security of the United States and Guyana. We start with education and training.
Admiral Fowler emphasized heavily on education and training as its strategy to countering threats, referencing Operation Trade Winds.
Then we work in exercises. As I mentioned, exercise Trade Winds, it is our most important Caribbean-focused exercise. We work on being able to rapidly respond to a range of threats. In the exercise, these are hypothetical threats. In the real world, General Bess laid them out quite well. Natural disasters, the threat of transnational criminal organizations. And so we work hard at our education, our training exercises, so that we never have to fight.
The Admiral mentioned that the acquisition and cross-servicing agreement, which was inked on Tuesday morning between the two countries, focuses heavily on logistics support. And while the question was posed to him about the United States establishing bases in Guyana, he responded by saying this.
The United States doesn't seek to have bases anywhere in the hemisphere. We seek to have the right military presence as invited by our sovereign partners. So we only come at the request of mutually agreed partnership for an exercise or training. And so our future presence here will be determined by our hosts, our friends.
During his visit to Guyana in September 2020, the U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo had referred to the president of Venezuela, Nicolas Maduro, as a drug trafficker and stated in no uncertain terms that he must be removed from office. Juxtaposing that statement by the Secretary of State with the content of the acquisition and cross-servicing agreement, which pinpoints the combating of transnational crimes, inclusive of drug trafficking, this reporter sought to ascertain whether there could possibly be incursions by the U.S. on Venezuela, using Guyana as its territory to do so. However, the Admiral debunked that notion.
This agreement is about our bilateral relationship. And it's about our long-standing bilateral relationship, and it is not aimed at any nation state or any one particular threat. It's designed for us to be able to operate and train and exercise effectively together.
He further supported the statements made by Pompeo at State House in Georgetown, Guyana in September 2020.
The statement that our Secretary of State made is a fact. Nicolas Maduro is a convicted narco trafficker. And the evidence, hard evidence, significant increase in narco trafficking based out of Venezuela is there. We see it daily. And the hemisphere is impacted by that insecurity. The only one who benefits by that are Nicolas Maduro and his cronies.
Just Thursday last, President Nicolas Maduro had reignited claims to Ghana's territory, which prompted a strong rebuke from President Irfan Ali, who highlighted that his Venezuelan counterpart had violated at least 2 international laws by doing so. President Maduro shot back on Monday, accusing the Guyanese president of meddling in Venezuela's internal affairs, while also accusing the U.S. of protecting the interests of its multinational, ExxonMobil. Both the United States and Canada have recently expressed deep concern surrounding Venezuela's claim over Ghana's territory, even while the dispute is currently before the International Court of Justice. CARACOM also registered its disappointment with the decree issued by Venezuela, noting that it remains firmly against any acts of aggression by Venezuela to Guyana and is in full support of the ICJ in its attempts to bring a peaceful end to the age-old controversy. Opposition leader Joseph Harmon had also issued a statement calling on Maduro to back off of Ghana's territory. Wendell Badri, HGP Nightly News.
Internationally, the U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo says al-Qaeda has established a new home base in Iran, although he has not presented any hard evidence to back that claim. Pompeo says the Iranian government was sheltering the group, but Tehran has dismissed the claims as warmongering lies. The Trump administration pulled out of the nuclear deal with Iran in 2018 and has since tried to force Tehran to renegotiate by imposing economic sanctions. Al Jazeera's Alan Fisher reports.
Mike Pompeo has spent the dying days of the Trump administration trying to burnish its and his foreign policy credentials. In a speech at Washington's National Press Club, he claimed an old enemy had found support from another long-time US adversary.
Al-Qaeda has a new home base. It is the Islamic Republic of Iran. As a result, bin Laden's wicked creation is poised to gain strength and capabilities. We ignore this Iran-Al-Qaeda nexus at our own peril. We need to acknowledge it, we must confront it, indeed we must defeat it.
President Donald Trump pulled out of the Iran nuclear deal in 2018, finally fulfilling an election promise. His administration then pursued a campaign it described as maximum pressure, aimed at forcing Tehran back to the negotiating table, imposing tough sanctions. But others who negotiated the deal refused to leave with the Americans. Pompeo insists other countries must wake up to the danger. The Iranians, though, have dismissed American claims, the foreign minister tweeting that Pompeo was pathetically ending his disastrous career with more warmongering lies. Relations between Washington and Tehran have deteriorated even further in the last 12 months. In January last year, the US carried out the targeted killing of Qasem Soleimani, the head of Iran's Revolutionary Guard Al-Quds force in Baghdad. And a US aircraft carrier is currently in the region responding to what the Americans call threats. Pompeo has claimed links between Iran and Al-Qaeda in the past without providing any firm evidence. One expert says this is more of the same.
If there was any evidence whatsoever, they would have rolled that out very quickly and very early in order to further justify the maximum pressure campaign against Iran. They didn't.
Mike Pompeo has been cranking up the pressure on Iran in recent weeks and has even announced fresh sanctions. Those close to Joe Biden believe that this is calculated, the intention to make it more difficult for him to re-engage with Iran when he takes over on January the 20th. Alan Fisher, Al Jazeera, at the White House.
And now for the weather. Present weather shows fair skies with a gentle breeze of 12 miles per hour from a northeasterly direction. The temperature for today is 27 degrees Celsius or 80 degrees Fahrenheit. Seas are moderate with waves of 5 to 6 feet. The weather forecast says to expect partly cloudy skies with a 50% or moderate chance of showers today, and for tonight, partly cloudy skies with a 40% or moderate chance of showers. Sunset today will be at 5:55 p.m. Sunrise tomorrow at 6:44 a.m. And that brings us to the end of the ZIZ Midday Newscast. Join us this evening for these stories and more in detail. Thank you for tuning in. I'm Jason Davis.